You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. This is your host, Koku. And I wanted to talk about a topic that I don't think we discuss often enough when we talk about this systematic oppression that we suffer. And the topic is ego, the white ego in particular, but I also want to speak about black ego and the mismanagement of egos on both sides. As you may know, ego is really a person's sense of self-esteem. Ego is a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. And typically, ego tends to pursue its own dreams and desires. It's selfish in that way. And that selfishness is a seed of destruction and suffering, right? If you're selfish for your own dreams and ambitions, that's destructive to the whole, right? To the collective. And so I want to talk about how ego will be the destruction of white society that's enacting this oppression on black society. But the thing about ego is, and its destruction, is that it will take a long time for it to implode on itself. You have to help bring about the destruction of ego. Before we get deeper into that topic, though, I want to play a clip of a comedian named Bill Burr, who I actually like, a white guy. Bill Burr is a funny dude, and he had this Netflix special called Walk Your Way Out. But there was this one part of the set I thought was interesting. And if you haven't heard it before, you'll hear it now, and I'll be curious to hear your comments, to read your comments in the comment section. Take a listen to this clip.
Can I get back to Kanye West? Half of you probably downloaded his shit, all right? All right, here we go. So my wife got freaked out because I told him, early on, she was loving the guy. And I was thinking he was cool. And then one day I saw him do an interview, and he was talking shit about how great he was. And there was just this look that was in his eye, and it just made me nervous. I'm like, dude, this guy's volatile, man. There's something with this guy. He's making me nervous. This guy is right on the edge of snapping, right? She goes, you're out of your mind. And I was thinking, I don't know. I think this guy's fucked up. And then I was convinced because one day I came walking in and she was listening to him do an interview and I didn't know it was him. And he was just in the middle of talking about how great he was. And I came walking in and all I did was hear this shit and literally a chill ran down my spine. And I just started thinking no. And I turned and I looked before it even registered that it was Kanye. My first thought was, oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. It's just a black guy. Oh, thank God. It's just a black guy. Yeah, now, you're right to pull back. This is right to get awkward here because you don't know where this could go. This could very easily go in a clannish direction, okay? So just let me clarify. Just hear me out. I'm thinking, thank God it's a black guy, meaning, thank God that ego that is in him, when that thing floated down from the heavens, or the cosmos, whatever the hell Joel Osteen shit you believe, all right? When that thing was floating down, it could have landed in anybody. Thank God it landed in a black guy. Thank God it got wrapped up in that, trapped within that. It's safe in there. No reason to worry when it's in there. Because if that ego, however, had floated down and landed in a blue-eyed white dude, there is no telling the damage that could have been done. You're talking entire civilizations wiped out, worldwide famine, the moon colliding with the earth. Thank God that ego landed in a black guy. Because he's just as nuts as some of the craziest white dudes of all time. He just doesn't have the opportunity to follow through with the madness. Right? Yeah, there's a glass ceiling on evil. You never noticed that? Dude, go home, put on the History Channel. Like the top 9 out of 10 most batshit crazy dudes who ever walked the earth are all white dudes. Now, why is that? Because white dudes are more evil than anybody else? It's a possibility. It's a possibility. We definitely got the numbers. But I think it's different. I just think, you know what it is? Nobody's watching white dudes. All right? White dudes don't, too many of them gather and somebody pulls up. All right, break it up. Keep it moving. Get out of here. Getting pulled over for no fucking reason. None of that shit. You're a white dude. It's just an open field. Anything you think, hey, I'm going to do that. No one's stopping you. You just start running. Next thing you know, you're handing out buttons. You got your own uniform. You're starting a fucking war, right? All Kanye West is allowed to do is fuck up an award show every 3 to 4 years, make a public service announcement a little awkward for Mike Myers. That's as far as he's ever gonna get. I know. You don't believe me, dude. Okay. Next time Kanye's going off on himself, I'm telling you, just close your eyes, forget it's him, and really listen to what is coming out of this guy's mouth. He says shit like, I'm a genius. I'm a god. I'm Shakespeare. My biggest regret is I'll never get to see myself perform live. That's a direct quote. My biggest regret is I'll never get to see myself perform live. Dude, you put that ego in a white dude that is, ich bin einen in der Streisen. What's the Blitzkrieg? What's a superior race? Vienna will return to Deutschland first. No, I'm telling you, but we're okay. We're okay. It's in a black guy. Nothing's gonna happen. You never notice that shit? Crazy black guys, the far as they can get, they can just freak people out on the subway. They can stand on a street corner with their book and their friends, just yelling about white people. These people, they got tails. The motherfuckers got tails. They're evil. And you just cross the street. That's it. In a perfect world, Hitler never would have made it past the subway level. That's as far as he ever would have got. You would have just been sitting on the train. Hey, what are you going to do tonight? I play a little fantasy football. I don't know. And the door just opened. He just come walking through. Once they should have the blue eyes and the blonde hair and the pubes like the sun. And you're just sitting there like, okay, just ignore him. Just ignore him. Let him pass through. Let him pass through. And he'd just walk into the other part of the train. Literally a world war. Just passing through. But he was a white dude. No one watched him. And his hair was flopping around. And nobody gave a fuck. All right? So that's kind of like the weird lesson that I learned with Kanye West. You know? Like every once in a while, racism works. Like 99.9% of the time, it's the ugliest thing we do to one another. But every once in a while, we get lucky, and that marble, it rolls into the right hole, and we get off easy. We got off easy with that guy. I got to commend you guys. You did well with the Hitler reference. You did all right. Nothing quiets a room like dropping the H-bomb.
When will African people have basic rights? When will we be protected? When will our cost of living be eliminated? When will our cultures be preserved? We need a new leadership, one that has studied the problems and learned the solutions. The Pro-Black Compendium is the book to start off that leadership. Quotations, essays, poems, stories, codes of conduct, curricula, principles, relationship advice, marketing tips, group economics, games, book clubs, movie nights, chronologies, civilizations, wars, warriors, authors, songs, conflict resolution. The list goes on. There is no book more necessary for starting our people on the path to African redemption.
And there you have it. I mean, there's so much to unpack in that little bit of humor that Bill Burr was able to drop there. White egos are dangerous, not because, well, ego itself is dangerous. That's true. But white ego is particularly dangerous because white people are innately savage. The more savage you are to begin with, and they're savage because of the conditions that they, evolved and matured through. From the area of the world that they came from, the caves, the lack of resources, they're savage. And a lot of black people are afraid to say it. I know some of you right now are cringing, maybe turning off this podcast, and that's fine. We didn't need you here anyway. We like to speak truth to power. White people are savages. Don't let them tell you that you and yours and you and your children are savages. They like to play the reverse psychology game on you. They tell you the things that's true about them, but they make it about you. Okay? So let's go back and talk about ego just a little bit more. Ego is a thing that separates people. It's the opposite of the collective. It's the opposite of oneness and unity, right? Because ego is about self. For us to advance as a people, as a black community, we have to destroy this ego. And we actually have to destroy the ego within ourselves as well. But we have to actively go out there and destroy white ego. We can't wait. I mean, there's the option to wait and let it die out because everything has a expiration date. But in reality, we have to hasten the end of this white ego. White ego is the cause, the white savagery and the ego on top of it is the cause for, a lot of the problems that we see in the world. Like Bill Burr just said, you let that white ego go unchecked, the moon will crash into the earth, there'll be worldwide famine, you'll destroy civilizations. That's what ego and savagery is for white folks. We have ego as well in the black community, but we're not savages. At least we're not savages towards white folks. Our savagery is within. But let's talk about ego in the historical context. Let's talk about where it comes from. So as you're probably well aware, at one time most peoples were tribal, right? Humankind was tribal. And in the tribe, there was the collective consciousness. There was no individual self. Our identity was a group identity. Our sense of self was part of nature and the universe. That's how we looked at it as Africans in particular, and maybe other groups saw it somewhat the same. In fact, I would wager to think that other groups saw it the same as well, right? So people's connection to the natural environment changed over time. How? Well, new tools, new technology allowed individuals to navigate and change the natural world to their liking, right? So when the African started to, think Egypt, think pre-Egypt, think Ethiopia, stuff like that. When we started to build and become builders, that kind of changed that collective thinking because now you had individual talents, right? You had those who could navigate technology better, who could build better, and so the self-importance started to come in. And then when Africans started to teach the European savages by way of Greece and then Rome, when we started to teach them, they came out of their dark ages, right? Remember, John Henry Clark always talks about Europe was in 2 dark ages, and we took them out of both. There was the original dark ages, right, before they started to show real intelligence, before Egypt started to proliferate its knowledge to subgroups of Europeans, right? And then, after the fall of Rome, Europe went into dark ages again. And once again, the Moors, the Africans, pulled them out of that as well. So that's the 2 dark ages that they were pulled out of, right? So anyway, with ego, before there was ego, there was the collective. And once we started to make tools and technology, and we started to change the environment around us to our own desire. And that's when the self started to come out of the collective. That's when ego started to grow. So in a lot of ways, the African gives the world ego, right? So changing the natural world to your desires changes the way you see yourself in the natural world or the universe. Therefore, technology leads to individualism. Do you understand that? Technology leads to individualism. And once you have individualism, what you're going to see occurring is the rise of socioeconomics, the rise of politics, right, as a means to control the natural environment and the people. So when you start talking about controlling the natural environment and the people, this is where your classism, racism, your slavery comes in. And this is where white folks went off the chain. This is where their savage nature just went out of control. Because now you had individual crackers who now, they can now, they're skilled with the knowledge that we gave them, and they can now change around them the way they want. And the way they decide to do it through their savage mind is through classism, racism, slavery. And this separates them from this collective. So white folks are, I said this today on Facebook and Twitter, no racial group is a monolith. And white folks are definitely not a monolith. There's a lot of infighting going on with white folks historically. But when the African comes into the picture, they get on a code. They get organized. They put aside that bullshit, and they focus on you. They use their savagery and their ego, boosted by their ego. They start to change your natural environment, or the natural environment in general, right? They start to put racism on you. They start to enslave you. They may decimate whole societies, like Bill Burr talked about. And so then what eventually happened with ego, historically now, is that ego started to believe that not only was it separate from the tribe, nature, and the universe, but individuals began to think that they were above the group. And that's where you have the creation of elitism. And I'm not going to say that there wasn't elitism in Africa. Of course there was. There were kings and queens and etc. Right? There were noblemen in Africa. But again, in Africa, amongst African people and Africa's children, we didn't have the savagery that they had. So that makes the fundamental difference between blacks and whites. So once you have that elitism, continuing with the historical evolution of ego, once you have that elitism, that leads to dominating people, to domination. You dominate those you think inferior or less civilized or a threat to your politics and your idea of superiority, right? So this is where the elites come from. Their ego of individuals made them come together as a collective, right? And start to dominate those who they thought were less civilized or were a threat to their being. So that's what white people are, a collection of individual egos on a foundation of savagery. Now, the thing that a lot of people don't tell you about ego has its own appetite. Ego makes you want to have more and more, be it power, knowledge, faith, material wealth. And as you try to achieve more and more, you're going to have instances of tyranny and domination. But the thing about ego, and this is the thing I wanted to kind of bring up today, and this is not going to be a long show today, but I wanted to bring this up because I want people to discuss these matters, is that ego must have a downfall, okay? Ego must have a downfall. That downfall can be dignified or it could be painful. And when you're dealing with savages, there's no dignified downfall, okay? So it must have to be a painful downfall. That means that you, black man, black woman, black child, black family, you have to bring about the downfall of white ego. Because the mistake that these white boys are going to make out here is they think that their ego and everything that comes of their ego will go on forever, forgetting that there is birth and there is death. But now, do we have the time as a community, as black people, do we have the time to wait for the inevitable death of white ego? Hell no. Because in the meantime, while we wait for this death, singing Kumbaya and marching and all this old dumb shit, we are dying at the hands of their ego. When these white cops are shooting black citizens, not just in America, but in the world, that's their ego oftentimes that's causing it. Go back and look at that Sandra Bland video. When that white boy pulled her out of that car because she was smoking a cigarette in her car. That was his ego at work and his underlying savagery at work, which led to the death of our sister Sandra Bland. Ego in white society will be their destruction, but it will take longer if we just wait it out. We have to be proactive and we have to attack this ego. Let me take a quick station break, and on the other side, I'm going to continue talking about ego, but I want to talk about black ego as well, because we mismanage our ego. Okay, just hold on. On the other side of the break, I will talk about black ego.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions. Peace, Seeker. This is Oni from the pro-black perspective, and we need power. Power will not be handed to us. We need to build power. But in order to build power, we need a power blueprint. You need to study the best blueprints available. You have Gardners. You have Wilsons. You have Williams. You have mine. Now, you'll have Cooks. Carlos A. Cooks was Garvey's best student. the greatest mind in the world from 1940 to 1966. Yes, the greatest. Yet Whitey doesn't want you to read his blueprint. Cook's blueprint isn't religious. Cook's isn't for integration. Cook's isn't for communism. Cook's isn't even for anti-blacks. Cook's blueprint is for Africa. And Cook's blueprint is the unknown blueprint that was the basis of black power as we know it today. When you say buy black, you're talking about Cook's. When you say black is beautiful, you're talking about Cook's. When you say Malcolm got something right, you're talking about Cook's. But Cook's blueprint was lost, and Whitey is hiding that blueprint behind a $1,000 paywall. He's hiding solutions from you, telling you you need to take out a small loan to get the information that can liberate you. Whitey does not want you to have solutions to your problems, but you need solutions. You need power. I will give you the Carlos A. Cook's Reader, valued over $1,000 at a 98% discount, $15. Send $15 to cash.me/$ABS only with the subject Carlos and your email address, and I'll send you the ebook. We need power. You need blueprints. Start building today.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. This is your host, Koku. And today's show, I'm talking about ego. I started off talking about white ego. Actually, I started off playing a clip from Bill Burr's stand-up special, Bill Burr being a white comedian who I do actually find funny. And Bill Burr, he had a 2017 Netflix special called Walk Your Way Out. And in that special, Bill Burr spoke about Kanye West, actually. And he was speaking about Kanye from the standpoint of, he saw Kanye on television. And you know Kanye. Kanye thinks of himself as Picasso and Shakespeare, all white boys, by the way. I don't know why you would think of yourself as a white boy. But, Kanye has that arrogance, that ego about him. And, Kanye is brilliant. He's a brilliant music maker. I'll give him that. But Bill Burr was saying how if you put that ego of Kanye into a white guy, there'll be destruction. There'll be destruction. And Bill Burr ends it off by kind of saying that, well, the reason why it's not so bad in a Kanye West is because he's black and because he's checked. Black people are monitored. We're only allowed to probably rant and rave on a street corner in Manhattan, New York, or on the subway. When we talk about crackers and the Israelites, this and that, and black people, please stop that shit. Please stop that. That does nothing for you. You just become a spectacle for white folks. I see you guys out there. And white folks are standing there, visitors to New York and stuff. They're standing there and they're just chuckling. Watching you with a sword in your waist and all this shit. Let me, come on, man. Come on. So, but yeah, Bill Burr says that, Kanye is checked. The black people are checked. Their ego is checked at the door. Versus white guys who are not being watched. So this is how you get your Hitlers, your Napoleons, etc. And speaking of Hitler, Napoleons, and the etceteras, all of those white guys who had that incredible ego and who were charismatic enough to have other Europeans follow them, They were all brought down by their ego, you see. But it wasn't a case where you waited long enough for their ego to bring them down. It was, you had to hasten the downfall of them via their ego. Now, on the flip side, as I said before the break, I wanted to talk about how black folks have ego as well, because you see, ego is universal. Like I spoke about when I broke down the historical development of ego, coming from the collective, from the tribe, and then gaining knowledge through new technologies that we came to make and create new tools, and how by some of us building new tools and making new tools and stuff like that, that led to our individualism, right? And then from there, that led to our knowledge of self, that we were good at this task. We were good at these various tasks. We were good builders, etc. And so that led to our ego. Our individualism via technology led to ego. And we gave this to Europeans. We gave this to the savages. And that was the danger. We gave this to the savages. And now, on top of this, the savagery, the innate savagery of the European, these cave people, these Neanderthals, now we gave them the tools for them to start thinking of themselves as better than others. Others in their own group, and ultimately others in the world. Because that's the extent of ego. You let ego go unchecked, it turns into elitism, right? Where a few people think they're better than the entire collective. And as African people, we have to admit that. We gave them ego on top of their innate savageness due to where they come from. Caves. Nothing. You know. So that was a dangerous combination. On the other hand, our ego, what do we use our ego for? Because we're not savages, except some of us are savages to our own people. But we use our ego to stunt on people, not realizing that stunting really stunts growth. Let me say that again. We use the black ego, our ego, we use that to stunt on one another, not realizing that stunting is stunting growth. Okay? We use our ego to have nice cars and have fly apartments, and when we can't even afford it, right? Meanwhile, Hispanics and Indians and white folks are living in better neighborhoods, living 4, 5, 6 people deep in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, stacking their paper, saving their money. You feel me? And living in areas, because right now I'm in New York. I can tell you white folks are stacked up in these apartments in Manhattan now. They're starting to leave and gentrify Brooklyn too. But they're gentrifying the parts of Brooklyn that's closest to Manhattan, that gives them access to Manhattan, right? And these different groups are stacking up in these apartments, like I said, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, 4 or 5, 6 people deep. One time I heard some young white musicians talking about 8 of them were in this 2 or 3 bedroom apartment. And they're stacking their paper. They don't believe in that stunting bullshit. But we will do that at our own detriment. We will work 2-3 jobs just to be able to maintain a car and an upscale apartment. That's what our ego is about. Our ego is about me being better than you. Me looking better than you. Me having more appeal to certain women better than you have appeal to those same women. And vice versa. Our black ego has us stunting on fashion culture. You know, in the Black Panther movie, there was this scene between Black Panther and his sister, and Black Panther was wearing something on his feet, and she did that thing that was a big meme about a year ago. What are those, is what she says to him. You know, that was a thing black folks was into in these memes about a year ago, I think it was. What are those? You know, talking about people's footwear. Are those the new Jordans? What are those? Are those the new KD? What are those? You don't often see different groups. You don't see Asians talking about what are those. I'm talking about as a group. Yes, there might be 1 or 2 Asians, so calm down. There might be 1 or 2 Asian motherfuckers who think they're hip Americans and this, that, and the other, who might pull some bullshit like that. But for the most part, I'm talking about groups here. I'm not talking about individuals. For the most part, as a group, you don't catch no Asian talking about what are those. They're happy to wear their little Bruce Lee Chinese shoes that we used to wear in the Caribbean, with some gunning pants and some white socks, looking like a karate man. They're happy with that shit. They're not out here talking about what are those, and those shits are like $7 or something like that. But that's what we do. That's where our ego takes us. Our ego takes us to be individuals, yes, aware of self, yes, but aware of self and individuals on some of the dumbest shit possible. You could have stayed at home with your parents. And that's another thing, black parents. Where did we get this thinking from in America, at least? Because in the Caribbean, it's not like that. And I'm not saying that, Caribbean folks are better or this, that, and the other, but it's not like that. Where you hit 18 years old and it's like, get your ass out on your own. But in America, there's this thing, that pushes kids out at 18. And so they have to start, or they feel they have to start stunting on people by having, the flyest apartment, the flyest car. Shit that they barely own. They're leasing, they're renting. And they're going broke trying to do it. We have to bring about the downfall of the particular type of ego we display as well. We can't wait for it to burn out. This is kind of the problem of our ancestors from like the civil rights era and stuff like that. They waited for white folks' ego to die off. You still hear Negroes today. Black folks today are still talking about when the old white races will die off and everything will change. Bullshit. That ego is passed down through something called culture. That doesn't die off. Unless you do something disruptive, it will not die off. Another thing we do with black ego, and this one is kind of personal to me too, because as a podcaster and a person who's trying to create an alternative black media, I've approached many people on social media, and I've talked about that on this platform before. I've approached many black folks who are every day up on social media talking about the things that matter to us in the diaspora. And I'll go to them in their inbox or what have you, and I'll say, hey, man, hey, lady, I see you talking some good stuff there, man. I see you doing some good works out here. Why don't you consider podcasting or consider blogging? Because we do have the Bitter Medicine blogs. You should check that out. I haven't added any new content lately because I can't find people who are willing to take the time and to write some of their thoughts out that they're already posting on social media. Write it out in a blog and post it for our, for the viewers, for the people who subscribe to the Bitter Medicine blogs to read, to create discussion points, right? But sometimes I go to these folks who I see out here talking and saying good stuff, and I say to them, hey, why don't you podcast with us? You look like someone who'll be good at that. Why don't you blog with us? You look like someone who'll be good at that. And, we need content that's black-centric, that's race-first, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've done this. And the person listens to me talk for about 10 minutes, 10 minutes, and then says, hey, you know what? That's a good idea. You just gave me a great idea. I'm going to go start my own blog site tomorrow. I'm going to go start my own podcast tomorrow. Motherfucker, I came to you telling you I have these platforms in place already. I just need the content creator, like yourself, to come on board. I will do promotion. I will do all of it. In addition to what you're doing for yourself, I will promote this, that, and the other. Come on board. And all you heard from me was, I'm just going to do my own That's your ego. That is your fucking ego. That says, I'm just going to go do my own shit. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell y'all something today. You don't have to believe me. Just go out there and observe the world. But when white folks, when those sites like Stormtrooper and that shit came about, I could bet money that was one or two white guys and they was at some function and they mentioned what they were starting and people started to say, oh, I'd be down to write something for Stormfront, for Breitbart. Yeah, I'll check it out. They didn't fragment themselves and say, I'm going to fuck off somewhere and go and do my own shit. But that's what we have in our community. You go and you talk to someone with an idea to do something, and they go and they run with the idea on their own. Now, there are some spaces where that is, I guess, okay, but it's very few. In fact, that brings me to the next thought I had concerning the black ego, where business is concerned. A lot of black folks would go into the same type of business as opposed to hopping on with someone else who's trying a business. You would then go and become a competitor to another black folk. I'll give you an example. At one time, I was considering starting a natural body care business, right? And then I looked at it and I realized and I remembered that all of those tables that I walk past in Brooklyn and certain parts of Manhattan, Harlem, where guys are selling, men and women are selling black soap and shea butter and, things of that nature. I then remembered, man, that sector is oversaturated with black folks. Why would I go into that sector that's so oversaturated with our own folks? And this is what black folks do all the time. We have about 3 business areas that we concern ourselves with, even though they're oversaturated sectors of the industry, of business. And we go in them and we go in there to compete against other black folks. As opposed to finding out and saying, okay, let me go into, say, creating comic books where there is not a lot of black folks in that space. But again, it's our ego. Our ego is, let me get into natural body products and compete with my brother and sister. And because I think I'm better than, or I can do better than what they're doing, I'm going to jump into something and oversaturate this sector even more. So then what happens? We all kind of fail, right? We all do bad. Because most of those businesses are still trying to earn a profit. And so here we come, adding to the competition, adding to the fact that now these other businesses can't reach profit level yet. We have to destroy that kind of ego. Because the ego that's on us right now, that's oppressing us right now, that's mixed with an innate savagery from those other people, that's enough to destroy us as is. Now we add to this by all this little petty bullshit ego that we carry on towards our own people, really. Is what we carry on to our own people. I don't know if you guys remember the rapper Big L. Big L was killed in Harlem, if I remember. He's from Harlem. I think he was killed in Harlem. And years ago when I used to make music, I was talking to a guy who was a friend at the time, who was a rapper. And we were talking, making a beat, and this friend of mine was telling me how this guy in Crown Heights was killed. A guy I had seen before by his apartment or something was killed. I'm like, damn, why did they kill him? Well, he was starting to do some hot music and someone killed him. Why? I think Big L was killed on some shit just like that too. Because that's the other thing about ego. Also that comes with his envy. And even though black folks might not suffer from that innate savagery that Europeans do, we do suffer from envy. You see what I'm saying? We have to kill ego. For us, we can kill our ego in a dignified way. For them, we're going to have to kill their ego in a painful way. There's going to be some suffering on both sides to destroy the ego and the savagery that they have going on. Ego won't go on forever, guys. This is something that I've been saying to you for some time now during this broadcast. Ego won't go on forever. Ego dies. You have to attack ego to make it die faster. So, We have to be better black people. We have to set aside this petty ego and envy that we practice in our community. Because ultimately it doesn't build a nation. We have to be nation builders. Okay? We have to transcend from self to oneness. We have to transcend to community. That's how you kill off ego. We have to go back to that tribalism, that collectiveness, that oneness with our nature and our own black universe. Forget the other bullshit. We have no friends. There's no black and brown coalition. Spanish folks don't give a fuck about you. No matter they might be on a street corner talking about Wakanda forever, Holmes. Fuck that. We have to get back to our oneness. We have to build our nation. And lastly, that's going to require our men and our women to work together. Yeah, see that ego is going on between black men and black women too. In our last two-part broadcast, we talked about the economic disparities, and we talked about how black women are doing better than black men and even white women. And a lot of times that causes friction between black men and black women. That brings out the ego. That brings out the envy. And there's so much more thing. We have a coon that they killed the other day in Sacramento, Stephon Clark, talking about black bitches and this, that, and the other. And dark women bring dark days and all this old coon shit. We got to get rid of that stuff. You can't build a nation when your men don't protect your women and your women aren't grateful for the protection. Where there's no respect. Okay? This ego that we have in our own community is very destructive. And it's destructive within the community, and it's destructive within the paradigm that we live in of white oppression. I heard someone say recently they don't know if white supremacy is a thing. That's another thing we got to stop doing too. I hate saying white supremacy, as you guys know by now. I like to say white inferiority complex. But whatever you call it, it's there. And the thing that we have to stop calling it is supremacy, because that feeds their ego as well. Before I go, let me tell you all a story of my life that happened that proved to me how dangerous the white ego is. Years ago, I worked in a lab, and in the lab, I was cool with a white guy in the lab. And the white guy used to do little dumb shit that I used to have to check him on from time to time. And this one time, I had to really check him on something because he was kind of watching what I was doing. I don't need no fucking white boy overseer, you understand? He was kind of watching something I was doing. I was like, hey, dude, you gonna stand up there and watch me do this? And he got mightily offended. Mightily offended. And the next day, I think it was, or maybe later that day, he came up to me and he said, hey, what's up? I said, ain't nothing, just chilling. He stood there. I said nothing else. He stood there, and he walked away. The next day I came in, I saw him, I said, good morning. He didn't speak. And he didn't speak to me again for the next 5 years or so while we were working together. So I came to realize at some point that, that next day when he came and said, what's up? And he stood there, didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything back. This fucker was waiting for an apology. You see how the ego, the white ego works? And let's be clear, if it hasn't been clear already. White ego is pushed on white people first. White people push their ego on other whites first. White dudes fall out with each other over an ego thing, over an ego trip, quickly. I always say especially white men, they can't keep white friends. They may have a good run of a couple of years, but then that comes to an end because their ego comes in even with other white folks because they're savages, and that's how savages do. So these white boys are hell on black people if you're not boosting their ego. Anytime you buck a white man's ego, there could be a little problem to a huge one. And the same thing for their pathetic women. You spurn the advances of a white woman, no matter how disgusting she is and she knows it, you could receive the wrath of their ego. They will even lie on you for their ego. Ask Emmett Till when you see him. Their ego and their savagery mixed together is dangerous. Dangerous. It's dangerous for the whole, for all of nature, really. For all of nature, for all of the so-called universe, the ego is dangerous. We've seen it in history. They've destroyed whole civilizations off of their ego, because ego also breeds envy. So that's something I personally went through with a white guy, and I learned in that experience, their ego is very, very important to them, especially when it comes to you Negroes. You're not kowtowing and capitulating to their ego. They're willing to kill you off of the earth. They're willing to kill your whole family. Black Wall Street, they'll bomb that shit because of their savagery, their ego, and the envy that it breeds. Meanwhile, you're out here talking about what are those shoes. You're out here stunting with a fly apartment that you can't even afford. Stunting with a fly car that you're leasing, a brand new 2018 that you can't even fucking afford. Some of you are doing this shit and starving inside. That's where your ego takes you. Instead of joining forces and building solid businesses together, you're competing against each other in the same 1 or 2, maybe 3 sectors. That's what you do with your ego. And that's your homework, man. Your homework is to destroy ego. Get back to the tribe. Get back to the oneness. Get back to the collective. While at the same time destroying this white boy's ego too. Because if you don't actively destroy that, the death of the white ego, the death of European ego, might take another 2018 years before it ends of its own volition. It might even take another billion years. If you don't get active, if you don't come together and create a sense of community, a sense of oneness amongst your people, and actively attack that ego, that thing might take millions of years before it dies off. And by that time, it might be everyone dying off. Before I go, I want to make an appeal. We have a GoFundMe where I'm trying to raise funds. I began this GoFundMe at the start of the year. I'm only trying to raise around $2,000 to improve upon the broadcast equipment, the editing, and the marketing of this podcast, because I feel that this podcast should be heard by many. And I need your help to do it, just for the price of a cup of coffee. If you can donate today, please go to our Facebook page, The Bitter Medicine Show on Facebook, or go on Twitter at BitterMeds, and donate today. Thank you to those who have donated in the past, but there's still a long way to go. And I wanted to raise this money by mid-June. So if you can, please support that today. Also, make sure to like and subscribe our content on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast on any podcast catcher that you use, be it iTunes or Podbean or Castbox or whatever, so you can get those notifications when we have new shows. I usually end these shows with a question. If not, I post a question in the description box below. Make sure to go over to YouTube and respond to those questions. I like to get your feedback. I oftentimes get more feedback from the racist trolls out here than I do get from intelligent black people. And that needs to change. Also, if you haven't already, take a listen to the Pro-Black Perspective podcast by my boy Oni Tase. Dropping a lot of good knowledge every Saturday. Make sure to subscribe to his show as well. And subscribe to the parent station, which is KWAZ Radio. You can find KWAZ Radio on all social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and others. Put aside your ego and support your people. Okay? We need writers for the Bitter Medicine blogs, www.bittermedicineblogs.com. We need writers. We need to break the stories that matter to us before Europeans come and tell us the bullshit they want us to know about certain stories, or they don't even tell us about certain stories, period. You don't have to have experience. You just have to have knowledge of self, be black first, and willing to put out content on a regular basis. Also, put ego aside when you only consider opportunities that have a paycheck next to it. That's another big problem in black society. We don't do anything. We don't do much of anything unless there's a paycheck next to it. We've got to stop that. We've got to stop that. Okay? We have to be about the collective now. That time is up now for all that bullshitting about what are those but we have to stop that now. You know, our civil rights ancestors were so focused on integrating into a burning house. Shout out to MLK, on the recent 50th anniversary of his murder. People like to say assassination to make it sound good. He was murdered. The King of Peace, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, the man who was about nonviolence, which all these crackers in America should have respected the fact that he wasn't looking to mobilize people on some violent shit. They shot him in the fucking face. But the problem is our ancestors in that time were so focused on integrating into that burning house, we forgot about our collective. We thought we were going back to some oneness of humankind. That's not going to happen. We have to be about us first. So, down in the description box where I post the questions, I want you to tell me, do you understand the white ego that's built on the foundation of the white savage? Do you agree with that? Because a lot of black folks don't agree. A lot of black folks are so timid and are so afraid to call out white folks for their savagery. It's just pathetic. We're so afraid, but we'll call out a dude for the type of shoes he's wearing, right? So down there, I'm going to pose several questions, but the main one is going to be: do you even agree or recognize the white ego and the danger of the white ego on top of the white savagery? Do you recognize the pettiness of the black ego? Because it's void of that savagery. And whenever it's only savage really towards their own. But do you recognize how petty it is? How it's not conducive to nation building? Do you recognize that we need to get back to building nations? Putting self aside somewhat and really think about the collective progress. Take some time out and please answer those questions below. Remember to like, subscribe, and share our content. We appreciate you. Until next time, this has been the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.